It all starts with a feeling, a cold that goes deep into your bones, the kind of cold that comes after the sun goes down when the world is just shades of gray and black. And there's fear. The dark isn't empty. You could hear things moving in the tall grass. You can see eyes reflecting the moonlight. Your whole life is lived between sunrise and sunset. The night is not yours. It belongs to the things with bigger teeth. This was the world for our early ancestors. A world without fire. It's hard for us to truly understand. We are surrounded by controlled energy. We flip a switch and light floods a room. We turn a dial and heat comes out. We are masters of our environment in a way our ancestors couldn't even dream of. For them, the world was raw, direct, and dangerous. They were not at the top of the food chain. Not by a long shot. They were prey as often as they were predators. Life was a constant struggle for warmth, for safety, for enough calories to see the next day. So how do we get from there to here? The answer is a relationship, a long, complicated, and world-changing relationship with fire. This wasn't a single discovery. It wasn't one smart individual, a character we could name Ugg, who rubbed two sticks together and shouted Eureka. The movies get that wrong. The story of fire is not a moment. It's a process. A slow dance that took place over hundreds of thousands, maybe even a million, years. It was a process of getting to know something terrifying, something powerful, and eventually, something essential. The first encounters with fire would have been pure terror. Imagine a lightning strike. A flash of impossible light, a sound that rips the sky open, and then a tree is burning. It's a monster. It roars, it eats everything in its path, it's hot and angry, and it moves. The instinct of every animal, including our ancestors, was to run, get away. Fire meant death. So the first step wasn't about making fire, it was about overcoming fear. Someone, somewhere, a long time ago, didn't run. Or maybe they ran, but then they came back. They came back to the smoldering ruins of a forest fire. They were curious. Curiosity is one of humanity's greatest superpowers. This early human, maybe a Homo erectus over a million years ago, would have approached cautiously. They felt the heat, they saw the strange, dancing light, they might have noticed something else. The big predators were gone, the fire had scared them away, the area around the dying fire was safe. That's a powerful lesson. Where there is fire, the monsters stay away. They might have also found food. Wild animals caught in the blaze. A roasted squirrel or a half-cooked boar. They would have tasted it. The meat was different, it was soft, it was easy to chew, it tasted better. And it filled their bellies in a new way. Another powerful lesson. Fire makes food better. These were the first seeds, the first hints that this destructive force could be something else. It could be a tool, but they couldn't make it. They were at the mercy of nature. They were fire scavengers. The next great leap was learning to keep it alive. A lightning strike happens, a tree is burning. Instead of just enjoying the warmth for a night, the group had an idea. Let's take some. Someone bravely grabbed a burning branch. They carried it back to their camp, to a cave or a clearing. They had captured a piece of the sun. This was a profound change. Now the camp had a center. It had a light that pushed back the darkness. It had a warmth that fought off the cold. It had a protective wall of light and smoke that kept the predators at a distance. The night was no longer just a time of fear. It became a time for the group. But this captured fire was a demanding pet. It needed to be fed. It would die if you didn't give it dry leaves, twigs, branches. Tending the fire became a job. A crucial one. Someone always had to be awake. Someone always had to make sure the embers didn't go cold. If the fire died, you had to wait. Wait for the sky to give you another one. It could be days. It could be years. This stage of fire harvesting, of fire tending, lasted for an incredibly long time. We find evidence for it in places like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found burned bone and plant ash deep inside the cave, dated over 1 million years ago. This wasn't from a natural wildfire sweeping through. This suggests that early humans were bringing fire into their homes. They were controlling it, not making it, but controlling it. Living with fire changed everything, even our bodies. And this is where the story gets really deep, where fire stops being just a tool and starts becoming a part of our own evolution. The biggest change was cooking. Think about what our ancestors ate before cooking. And raw meat. Tough, fibrous plants. Roots and tubers from the ground. It was a hard diet. It required a lot of work, a lot of chewing. Our early ancestors, like Australopithecines, had massive jaws and big flat molar teeth for grinding all day long. They also had big guts. A long digestive tract is necessary to break down tough, raw food and extract the nutrients. But guts are expensive. A big digestive system uses a lot of energy. Your body is like a budget. It only has so many calories to spend. If you spend a huge amount on digestion, there's less to spend on other things, like a brain. Cooking changed the budget. When you cook food, you are essentially pre-digesting it. The heat breaks down tough cell walls in plants. It denatures proteins and melts fats in meat. It makes everything softer, easier to chew, and far easier to digest. This meant we could get more calories out of the same amount of food with less effort. Suddenly, you don't need a giant jaw and huge teeth. Over many generations, our faces started to change. Our teeth got smaller. Our jaws became less massive. Look at your own face in the mirror. It's a fire-shaped face. It's the face of a creature that eats cooked food. And the energy savings from our gut were enormous. With food being so much easier to process, our digestive tracts could shrink. A smaller gut uses less energy. So where did all that saved energy go? It went to our heads. Brains are the most energy-hungry organs in the body. Your brain right now is using about 20% of your body's total energy, even though it's only a small fraction of your weight. For a big brain to evolve, you need a steady supply of high-quality, easy-to-digest energy. Cooking provided exactly that. This is often called the expensive tissue hypothesis. You can have a big gut or a big brain, but it's hard to afford both. By outsourcing our digestion to the fire, we freed up the metabolic resources to grow bigger, more complex brains. Fire didn't just warm our bodies, it fueled our minds. It's not a coincidence that the timeline of consistent fire use, starting with Homo erectus, lines up with a dramatic increase in brain size in the human lineage. Cooking also made our food safer. Fire kills bacteria and parasites. This would have reduced disease and increased survival rates. It allowed us to eat things that were previously inedible or dangerous. It broadened our menu and made our food supply more reliable. But the changes weren't just physical. They were social. The campfire became the first living room. Before fire, a group would likely scatter at night, huddling for warmth and safety. But a central fire brings everyone together. It creates a focal point. You sit and face each other. You share food, you look at each other's faces, illuminated by the flickering light. This is where society was forged. The day was for hunting and gathering. The night around the fire was for everything else. It was time for social bonding, it was time for making and repairing tools. The firelight extended the useful day. It was also time for communication. Imagine the scenes around those ancient fires. People sharing information about the day's hunt, planning for tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, telling stories. The dancing shadows, the crackling flames, it's a natural theater. This is where language could have blossomed, moving beyond simple instructions to complex narratives. This is where culture began to be passed down, not just through imitation, but through words. The fire was a teacher. It showed us how to transform things. You put a piece of wet, soft clay near the fire, and it becomes hard, durable pottery. You put a piece of soft wood in the fire, and its tip becomes hardened and sharp, a more effective spear. This was the beginning of technology, of understanding that you could change the properties of materials to make them more useful. This path would eventually lead to melting rocks to get metal, and to the entire industrial world we live in today. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were firekeepers. We were dependent on its natural sparks. But we were getting smarter. Our brains were growing, fueled by the very fire we were tending. And eventually, we solved the final piece of the puzzle. We learned how to make fire on our own. This was the moment of liberation. No more waiting for lightning. No more desperate treks to a neighboring tribe to beg for an ember if your fire went out. We became fire creators. We don't know exactly when this happened. It probably happened in different places at different times. But by the time of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, our ancestors had mastered it. They developed two main methods. The first was friction. You rub two pieces of wood together. The friction creates heat. If you do it right, with the right kind of wood and some dry tinder, you can create a glowing ember. The hand drill, a stick spun between the palms, was a simple way. The bow drill, which uses a bow to spin the stick much faster, was a more advanced version. It requires skill, patience, and knowledge of the right materials. The second method was percussion. You strike certain types of rock together to create a spark. Hitting a piece of flint against a piece of pyrite or iron sulfide will shave off a tiny hot particle of iron that burns in the air. A spark. If you can catch that spark in some very fine dry tinder like fungus or cattail fluff, you can coax it into a flame. Making fire on demand was a revolutionary technology. It was like having a superpower. It meant we were truly free to go anywhere. We could move into colder climates, into deep caves, into new lands, and we could bring our warmth and light with us. Fire was no longer a thing we found. It was a thing we carried. The knowledge of how to make it was one of the most precious things a tribe could possess. The relationship had come full circle. We started as creatures who feared fire. Then we became scavengers who took its leftovers. Then we became keepers who tended its flame. And finally, we became creators who could call it into being whenever we wished. This mastery had a profound psychological effect. We weren't just another animal anymore, subject to the whims of nature. We could create one of nature's most powerful forces. It gave us a sense of control, of power over our environment. It separated us from the rest of the animal kingdom in a fundamental way. Fire became more than a tool. It became a symbol. It was warmth, life, and community. But it was also destruction and danger. It held a duality that we have always found fascinating. It worked its way into our myths, our religions, our language. We talk about a spark of inspiration or an old flame. We gather around bonfires to celebrate. We light candles to remember. The story of how humanity discovered fire is the story of how we became human. It's a story of evolution that isn't just about genes and bones, but about knowledge and culture. The fire itself didn't change our DNA, but the consequences of controlling it did. The cooked food, the bigger brains, the social structure, the technology, all of these things shaped the species we are today. Every time you light a match, or turn on a stove, or sit by a fireplace, you are reenacting the final chapter of that ancient story. You are participating in a relationship that is over 1,000,000 years old. A relationship that began in fear, grew into a partnership, and ultimately gave us the power to change the world. It all started with a cold, dark night and a brave, curious ancestor who decided to walk towards the light instead of running away. That one small act of courage, repeated and learned over countless generations, is what set us on the path to becoming who we are. We are the children of the flame.